Call the meeting of the Design Adjustment Committee to order. Before we get started, I have to read a brief introduction. The Design Adjustment Committee's purpose is to establish clear and measurable review criteria for the consideration of major deviations from the city's technical standards and specification manual, building and design material standards, and subdivision standards. The committee does not consider the housing type, cost of the proposed unit, occupants, building material, unit size, number of bedrooms, or the architectural design of the structures. These hearings are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings. That means it's like a court hearing, and the committee's decisions are constrained by the standards in the ordinance and based on the facts presented. All variance requests require 4/5 vote of the committee to grant the variance. Appeals of committee decisions are to Superior Court. The parties of these cases are entitled to an impartial board. If a board member has a fixed opinion on the matter, a financial interest in the outcome, a close relationship with an affected person, or has had any ex parte communication about the matter, please disclose that information to determine if a recusal is necessary. City staff will introduce the proposed project to the committee, and committee members may ask questions. The applicant may present additional information about the project, and members may ask questions. If anyone wishes to provide evidence at today's hearing, witnesses must sign in on the clipboard at the back of the room and be sworn in. Because witnesses are to provide sworn testimony, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. When a witness comes forward to give testimony, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly. At this time, staff will administer the oath for all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony.
If I can have all staff, applicants, and anyone in the audience that wishes to speak this afternoon to please stand up and raise your right hand. Please note that if you're not sworn in, you must be sworn in prior to speaking. Thank you. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from November. Any comments on the minutes? I guess I did have one minor comment. I think the applicant for the Maple Avenue Luke Menas is spelled M-I-N. I think it's supposed to be M-E-N in various spots. Minor change. It's the only correction I had. I'll make a motion to approve those minutes with that change.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. First item today is 4201 Maple Avenue, continued from the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Yes, this is a continuation from the November 15th DAC meeting. 4201 Maple Avenue is the case in question here. Just a refresher, here is the subject property with the undeveloped portion of Maple Avenue. The applicant has revised their plans based on discussions at the last meeting, and they are requesting for a design adjustment from the minimum standards for a minor street and a minimum quarter radius of a roadway. Your case summary has been updated to reflect these changes. There were originally 4 separate adjustments requested, and that's been narrowed down to 2. The relief from the minimum tangent length for a roadway has been removed, along with the standards for the residential driveways. That waiver request has been removed as well. On your screen is the revised plan submitted by the applicant, showing the proposed Maple Avenue right-of-way, now showing 20 foot in total pavement width. I also have, for your reference, some detailed plans of the cross-sections, the proposed tree removal, which was discussed at the last meeting. And here's the previous site plan with the requested adjustments that was provided at the last meeting as well. Just to back up a little bit, again, wanted to hit on the fact that this is a non-standard minor street cross-section, and they are providing access to 4201 Maple Avenue from 43rd Street. The applicant, again, is proposing that 20-foot radius at the roadway edge rather than 35 feet. And then they are requesting 3 separate waivers for the cross-section, and that is no sidewalk on either side of Maple Avenue, the typical crown cross slope, and the applicant's proposing an inverse crown, and then the 40-foot right-of-way, which is an existing condition. There's existing 33-foot right-of-way for the site. So I've also provided the waivers that were eliminated. Those are the changes proposed by the applicant. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant's here as well. I ask that this updated report be entered into the record. Happy to answer any questions.
Just I have a real quick question, just to clarify, with the, and maybe this is an applicant question, but I think the primary issue at the last meeting was, I believe that 21-inch, I think it's labeled as a laurel oak,
Yeah, there's a
couple of them.
It's a multi-stemmed, or our arborist actually went out there to confirm that. It was mislabeled. It's a live oak, a double live oak, 22 and 21-inch live oak that's being proposed to be removed with this proposal.
Okay, so it is being proposed to be removed with this, but the pecan tree clusters there closer to 43rd Street, they
Yes.
were going to be removed in the previous submittal as well?
In both submittals,
Okay,
yes.
so there's no change to those?
Correct.
So the biggest change as far as trees go are those 2 live oaks?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Pat? Thank you. I'll probably have more questions later, but thank you. Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good afternoon. I'm Luke Menas, Stroud Engineering. Thank you for the catch, Rob. I've tolerated worse, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I spoke with planning staff yesterday and earlier today about the tree in question, the 21, 22-inch live oak. I believe the city arborist was on site yesterday and set me straight on that. I'd already mischaracterized that as a laurel oak, and I believe he's here. I don't know if he's available to comment, but I'm not going to offer any more mischaracterization about the tree. But what I read was that it was a viable tree. And in light of what I read, I did want to get back to what you mentioned was the previously submitted alignment, which did show the road going around the tree. We left off at the last meeting. I think there was some there was concern about the making concession on the city right-of-way, building a road that didn't quite meet the technical standards to save a tree that may not be there in 3 years or 30 years or whatever it might be. Then you're stuck with a road that's got a big swag in it for no good reason. Leaving the meeting last month, in light of those discussions, I thought, well, I'll take a cue from another arborist I spoke to one time that said the best thing you can do is plant new trees today if you can't save a tree. And so I came up with this alignment without sidewalk to make room for street tree plantings. And that's how I was prepared to come in and defend that alignment today. But in light of what I read about the tree from the arborist report yesterday, I would like to defer back to that original alignment. So we may need to discuss zero tangent lengths, narrower road width, offset pavement, and get back to where we left off last time.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Staff mentioned that that was something we could proceed with, if that's okay. I know we've got the exhibit still in there. Is that?
Yeah, I guess the question for the attorney's office, is that acceptable to still discuss the item? I mean, I know that what seems to be presented in this packet is an updated alignment. Are we still able to consider the previous alignment from the last meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was included as another attachment, the previous
Yes.
submittal to this packet.
And if any aspect of this alignment is found to not be palatable to the board, or you feel like it's too big of an ask, then the alignment that I turned in a couple weeks ago is something I'm willing to discuss further and defend. In either case, I would like to express strongly my desire to omit sidewalks. In either case, whether it's because of the 33-foot right-of-way, when you put the road in there, you've got a 6.5-foot shoulder between the right-of-way line and the edge of pavement. If you put a sidewalk in there, you've just forfeited street trees. So whether it's replacing a tree that you have to take down or augmenting, we are going to take some of those pecan trees down at the entrance. So there's opportunity to come back and replace those with live oaks or some other planting. And I do want to see that on the plan. I can talk at length about my feelings about sidewalks in situations like this where they're not ever going to connect and extend. It's a dead-end road. I recognize the need and desire for sidewalks on a lot of the streets in town when there's potential for future extension, even if it's not really apparent at the time you're doing your project. But in this case, we know that this is the end of that right-of-way, and I feel like the public's interest is served by pedestrian access in that street. I do it every day when I go home. I have no sidewalks on my street, and I don't believe that conflicts with pedestrians and vehicular traffic is something that is a problem in this situation. And I believe that there's some members of the public here that live on or adjacent to this road that will probably come and say the same thing, but again, I'm not going to make characterizations for them. I'll let them come up and speak.
Okay, so other than your feelings about sidewalk, what is the site constraint other than the right-of-way width to installing sidewalks?
It's a qualified opinion about the need for sidewalks. I'm a civil engineer, and I can tell you that if the sidewalk is there with a 6.5-foot shoulder, then you've got a 1.5-foot plaza and you've got a header curb. It provides no blockage for pedestrian vehicle conflicts with a header curb. A person can drive right off the road. So typically you'd see a stand-up curb in that situation where you've got sidewalk that's effectively just flush up against the travel lane. So that's one thing. And again, the other thing is you've got, with the 6.5-foot plaza, you do not have room for plantings as well as a sidewalk. You have to choose between street trees and a sidewalk. And I feel like this community, the public that this roadway serves, is better benefited by replacement of street trees. Again, regardless of the alignment that we select here today, they're benefited more by trees along this road than they are sidewalk, because the road itself can provide pedestrian access in that it functions as a very limited dead-end corridor.
Okay. Any questions for Luke? All right, Luke, I'm sure we'll have additional questions, but I do want to get the public hearing going.
All right, thank you.
So, thank you.
And again, if there's any specific questions about the tree, the live oak, or anything about it, or what we propose to do to try to retain it, I'm happy to answer those. But again, I'd love to hear from city staff if they've got any opinions about the viability, and you could hear it from them.
Understood. Okay, at this time, we will open the public hearing. If you've, I guess, question for the attorney's office again, sorry. The comments that were, or the, I guess, from the public that were submitted previously in the last meeting, are they still on record, or do they need to be restated?
Yeah, they're part of the record in the minutes.
Okay, so there's no need to reiterate previous comments if anyone was here who spoke previously. Okay. Knowing that, anybody from the public who wishes to speak?
Good afternoon, and Merry Christmas to y'all. I'm John Bernhard Thursum. I own the lot at the corner of 43rd and Wrightsville. And I appreciate the remark about the reiteration. I do want to reiterate what I said last month, that my wife and I have lived there since 1992, over 30 years. And of course, we don't want to see any diminishing of the neighborhood we've grown to enjoy. And I did, again, back in 1992, when I moved there, I asked city staff about the alley, which was in a muddy, almost impassable alleyway. And they said there was no intention to pave that street, and which is ironic because there are property owners on those streets, or on that street, on that alley. And there was really no access to them except through that alley. The tree, which I was overjoyed to hear it was not a laurel oak, but a live oak, sets the visual character of the neighborhood, which I know is a city intent to preserve the historic and natural character of neighborhoods. If that tree were removed, it would destroy the entire character of what we've grown to call Hurricane Alley, which would be a tragedy. And I hope we can save it, if possible. The width of the road, I mentioned last time that 43rd Street is only 13 feet wide. Cedar Avenue behind us is 15 feet wide, which is adequate paving. I know it does not meet city standards, but there's nothing around there, I believe, that is standard by today's standards. So I think we can approach this road, this paving, if we are going to pave it, from a non-standard point of view, that there's got to be a creative way to solve this dilemma. One thing I want to bring up is there's an elephant in the room, and that is as you look between my lot there in the corner, which I have a lot of frontage on this street, 210 feet. Full View owns behind me, Full View owns the next one, and I believe the same person owns the 3 lots that are facing Wrightsville Avenue, 2 of which are pretty much untreed. And what I'd recommend is that a similar, very wise city decision be followed from the late 1990s, which I asked one of the planners about yesterday. And that is the Eagles Nest condos accessed off of Carr Avenue, down Maple, and blocked off on Maple beyond the paving to the parking lot of Eagle Nest. It was a wise decision by the city not to take traffic through Maple to 43rd Street, to keep 43rd Street a residential street as it should stay. If we dump more traffic on 43rd Street, it's going to head for Wrightsville Avenue, which is always backed up, especially rush hours. It's hard to get out there in traffic. So the Eagle Nest condominiums was a wise decision to take that traffic from Maple Avenue out to Kerr Avenue and not dump it on 43rd. We hope that same kind of idea can be followed on our side of 43rd Street. Those vacant lots that face Wrightsville Avenue, we encourage the city to look at accessing this lot in question that way, and the other lots. The elephant in the room is that big acreage there, which we assume another applicant's going to come forward wanting to develop that property, and it's going to add more traffic to us. And each unit's going to have at least 2 cars, maybe 3. That's going to dump an awful lot of traffic going past my house and anyone else who lives on Wrightsville Avenue there, accesses from the rear. And lastly, drainage. Whatever is done with whatever alignment, whatever paving, has to take into consideration the drainage, the poor drainage all around our entire block. Wrightsville, 41st, Cedar, and 43rd is a mess. Somehow there has to be some logic applied and maintenance applied to that entire block. So during storms that we have proper stormwater drainage. A big problem we have right now is with a heavy rain like we had a few days ago, there was a lot of water backing up that doesn't drain anywhere. If you walk, as I do with my dog, down 43rd, Cedar, and up 41st to Wrightsville, try to look at the drainage ditches. They're almost all swales now. They're not ditches, they're swales, especially on Cedar and 41st. Once they fill up, the culverts are pretty much filled in too. Where does the water go? All we know right now at this early stage is that the engineer is planning to put a stormwater pipe, I think, to 43rd Street. The question is, where does it go from the end of Maple Avenue at 43rd to drainage? We can't get water to drain there now. How is the additional stormwater drainage going to get to the retention pond when we can't get regular maintenance, as I complained about last meeting? So please make the street as narrow as possible, hopefully pervious paving. Sidewalk we don't really see as an issue, and we'd like to see the curvature to save the live oak. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in the public hearing? Hey, Luke, hang on. I'll catch back to you in a second after the public hearing if you wanted to respond to any of that. Okay, I will close the public hearing and we can begin any discussion on this issue. Actually, first, if it's possible, I saw Aaron Reese in the back of the room. Is he available to come up to talk about those trees and the potential impacts? Sorry to put you on the spot, Aaron. I figure that's why you're here. I guess my biggest question was, I understand you've visited the site. I'm kind of interested to hear what you feel like the sort of long-term viability and condition of those trees are. And then I guess the follow-up question to that would be, if you've had an opportunity to look at the original alignment that preserved the tree, what kind of an impact will that alignment have on that tree?
Sure. Yeah, the first time I've seen any of the plans at all. I saw the updated plan yesterday. It's the first time I've seen any of it. Today's the first time I've seen the original with the kind of jogging the road around the tree. After reviewing the two trees yesterday, they are indeed two live oaks, southern live oak. They're not laurel oak as listed on the tree survey. The 21-inch sits closer to the inside of the street section, with the 22 being, to the outside edge. They are, best I can tell, they are two distinct trees. They just grew up very close to each other. The 21-inch they're both in good health. The smaller of the two, the 21, kind of comes up and out over the road. So if the road could be shifted and built very close to grade with as minimal cut as possible, or even built up slightly above grade to preserve the root system as the road goes by them, I think they could, in theory, they could both be saved. Like I said, they're both in good health, so I think you have a good chance of saving them long term. My only concern with putting the road through would be vertical clearance of the 21-inch tree over the road, just because of the form, because it comes up about maybe 8 or 10 feet, and then it kind of drops and goes over the right-of-way. So there may not be sufficient vertical clearance over a new road, no matter how it's built. But that would really be my only concern with the two. I think you could feasibly, if you had to, it would be perfectly fine to take out the 21 if the vertical clearance is an issue, and then save the one on the other side, the 22-inch.
Well, that was good. You reading my mind, because that was going to be my follow-up question was, could you remove one and preserve the other?
Yes.
If the 21 is going to be a vertical clearance issue, which is, it sounds like it could be an issue for fire. It could be an issue for even utilities and their vac trucks and the other large vehicles. It may, sort of help preserve the character now, but if it gets hit,
Yes.
then that would be an issue. And then my other question is, you had talked about putting the road on grade. That seems kind of in line with what they're proposing. I'm not gathering that there's a lot of cut proposed, but what there is a water line, a sewer line, and a storm line. Now,
Yes, utilities could be an issue, but they should be able to be bored under if need be, I would
Okay.
assume.
okay, yeah, and I do agree that using the inverse crown option is less invasive for the tree roots, and I think I said that in the last meeting, so I still agree with that. But you feel like those could remain viable trees, absent the
If the-
vertical clearance issue.
Yes, if the design of the roadway and installation of the utilities can be worked out, I think they're absolutely be viable trees. Unfortunately, like I said, with the vertical clearance on the 21 inch, unfortunately, I didn't have my measuring rod with me yesterday when I was out there, so I couldn't check that. But it would definitely need to be checked.
Okay. Any other questions for Aaron? Thanks, Aaron, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I know that isn't really a question and answer with the public information, but I will speak to a couple of the issues I heard. The drainage is not for consideration necessarily by this board. That is a TRC issue. I believe I stated that previously. That has not gone through full TRC yet, and we expect that will be addressed through the TRC review. So we're not going to address drainage as part of this. And as far as traffic goes, I mean, we have no way from this board to restrict, or committee to restrict access once it's built and open to the public. So, you know, what we're considering is the site constraint itself, you know, and then fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, you know, it's an unimproved road right now, which means effectively the lots that front on Maple are not buildable lots. So that's why there's no development back there. If the road is built, they're developable lots. Whatever is permitted by, you know, by zoning would be permitted to come in. So, you know, we don't know what that's going to be. And I think part of my concern is making sure that the infrastructure is available on this road to support what would probably inevitably be a much more intensive use once the road's built. That's my opinion. Any discussion on this before we dig into each variance and waiver?
Mr. Chair, I would tend to agree with you about the concerns that what this looks like today may, you know, once the public infrastructure is constructed, it opens up other possibilities for further development of the vacant lots. And I know we had a lot of discussion about sidewalks at the last meeting, and this board has made adjustments in the past to allow, instead of sidewalks on both sides of the street, only on one side of the street. And I would think in the same vein, this board can consider street trees on only one side of the street. And I wonder if it wouldn't be a fair compromise. You know, I mean, the city has standards for a reason. And unless there's real objective reasons offered for, you know, why the standards cannot be met, I wonder if there's in this particular case, street trees on one side and a sidewalk on the other side provides all the necessary infrastructure to support the future development. And I know that means that the 21-inch live oak, you know, comes into question, but I think we have to weigh that relative to all the other standards and variances that are requested.
As a follow-up to that, I agree with what you're saying. I think that's where, I mean, I feel like knowing now that we're looking at two distinct trees with the 21 and the 22, I guess was the other dimension. I don't have it in front of me, sorry. The ability to potentially remove one that's going to, you know, be a long-term, you know, vertical clearance issue. Can you hit the, yeah, thanks. Here it comes. Remove one seems like a pretty good option to me. I'm not all that bothered by the fact that the road may have a little meander in it, you know, even if both trees die. You know, that could call it traffic calming, I don't know. There's been odder configurations of roads, you know, in the city. So, you know, I'm willing to sort of revert to the previous alignment to help preserve the 22-inch, you know, and then let the TRC decide ultimately if the 21-inch has to go or not, because I know that fire does sit on the TRC, and if, you know, I want any pictures of those trees in front of us here to be able to say for sure it needs to go or it doesn't need to go, but I'm willing to consider the option of altering the alignment to preserve the 22. And I really like your option of putting street trees on one side and potentially sidewalk on the other, because there is quite a bit of undeveloped property, you know, on the, I guess it's the north side, planned north, I don't know if it's actual north, but planned north of the side of Maple Avenue. And then, you know, when this does get to be built, all the lots that front on Wrightsville can then subdivide and then create, if they choose, maybe, you know, you see the option of subdividing to create lots that front on Maple. And again, we wouldn't have any way to prohibit that, so we have to plan for it to occur potentially. So I feel like that option best supports the future use. That's where I feel.
But I believe, maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but if we are going with an option with street trees on one side and a sidewalk on the other side, that requires the revised alignment of the street that is in the current packet, because the previous alignment, the way it was meandering along, wouldn't allow for sidewalks. Unless I'm wrong, but that's what was my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're speaking to sidewalks, I know that the engineer spoke to the concern about having a header curb, flat curb, and then sidewalk. And that is something that engineering we don't prefer, because there does need to be some sort of vertical separation or horizontal separation. And with limited right-of-way, horizontal separation isn't really an option. So I was kind of thinking personally, if the sidewalk was going to be required, that one of those two sides would have to have vertical curb in order to, and then you can bump the sidewalk right up against the back of curb. It's not ideal, but you know, when you have limitations like a 33-foot right-of-way, you can make those types of concessions. Luke, do you mind coming up for 1 second? Thank you. I know you had your hand up and wanted to say some stuff, so I'll let you say your thoughts first, and then we might ask you some follow-up questions.
When I raised my hand earlier, my first inclination was just to point out, Mr. Thurston reminded me another point I should have brought up, which is just a matter of fact, that there was concern about drainage, which I realize this is not the purview of the board to discuss, but it is more impervious surface. When you're talking about a 20-foot wide road, even narrower in sections of it than a 5-foot wide sidewalk is a pretty significant percentage of impervious relative to the roadway itself. So again, you're balancing the needs of the public versus what is the impact to the community. That's all I was going to say. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Okay.
As far as the tree and the sidewalk, again, looking at this alignment that's on the screen right now, which is the one that we would much prefer, and to save the tree, both stems of the tree. There's no room on the north side. I believe that's oriented north up. We're butted basically up against the right-of-way line. On the other side, is there a exhibit? I believe it's the second or third page on this that you could get up on the screen by chance.
I think Linda,
I think it was Appendix 5, or attachment number 5 was towards the end of the thing today. It's in the link that was provided yesterday. Oh, maybe, okay. Well, anyway, the swag in the road is there for the benefit of the tree, and putting sidewalk right back where you've moved the road away from the tree and then coming right back and putting the sidewalk is kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Again, I'll let arborists comment. I don't want to mischaracterize the impact on the roots, but if we do what you've suggested and install the sidewalk at grade and then put in a standard curb, then you just drop the roadway 6 inches. You're getting further into the root system of the tree, so you're doing everything you can to take the tree down. And we're asking you just to look at this thing, at the functionality of it. Does it really need a sidewalk? And especially alongside that section with the tree. Let's do a payment in lieu. Let's connect some sidewalks somewhere else in this town that people walk on. I had to swerve around somebody on Pine Grove today to get here. There's a lot of streets in this city with no sidewalk, and I really wholeheartedly believe, as an engineer, as a resident of a street with no sidewalk, that this community, this street, 500 foot of Maple Avenue that's a dead end, can function without a sidewalk, and that all of the residents that are here today would prefer not to have a sidewalk, and I'd wager that anybody who lived there in the future would
Noted.
prefer the
Okay,
tree.
okay, noted. Thank
I'm
you.
sorry to beleaguer it, but that's it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? What is fire's minimum? I see that the width of the narrowed, on the previous alignment, the width is shown as 16 feet, which looks like it's 14. It narrows to 14 feet of asphalt plus a foot on either side, so 16 feet of total drivable width. What is the minimum that fire needs?
The minimum that we prefer is 18 feet. The width of a fire truck from mirror to mirror is 9 feet.
You said the width is 18 feet, you said?
Prefer 18 feet, but we do not necessarily have a quote-unquote standard that we go by as to this is what we have to do per fire code. Okay, it's a recommended type of thing based in the appendix of the code, which is not an enforceable part of the standard.
Okay.
We would prefer 18 feet, but we do have areas in this city who have, that is significantly less than that we can still maneuver fire apparatus as long as it's an all-weather type surface that we can drive on.
Okay. All right. Well, we have to dig into these waivers. The first waiver is the reduction of the radius at the entrance to the street from 35 to 20. I feel like with the roadside ditches that exist on either side, if they can justify through auto turns that 20 feet is sufficient, I don't have any issues with that. So I will make that my motion, is to approve adjustment number 1 from 35 to 20 feet with the condition that they provide auto turn analysis with the TRC submittal to justify that radius.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion on variance number 1? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. And that was the same, just to clarify, that waiver was the same on the previous submittal versus the current. So there was no change to that one. We do start to get into differences when we get into waiver number 2 or adjustment number 2, which is the non-standard width. And I would, if we start to get into hybridizing the previous submittal with the revised alignment, we need to be pretty specific on what we're approving and what we're not. Any thoughts on that? To me, it sort of comes down to the value of the tree or trees versus sidewalk. I do agree that even if the trees weren't there, having the inverse crown with drainage there is probably the preferred option, just to avoid impacting adjoining properties and potentially any other root systems that may be outside of the right-of-way. So that section I am in support of, regardless. And I think
Is that C on this chart here, reverse cross?
C.
Okay.
Yes. And I appreciate the way this was presented in that they had the ones crossed off with the revised. That's very helpful for us if we have to consider both. So thank you.
Just in discussion, I think D is also, there's 3 feet of right-of-way out there that I don't,
Yet they can't change that,
so I think, yeah.
right? Because the standard is 40, and they are providing 33, and they have a bona fide, they can't provide more than that. So I'm with you. I agree on, I've already lost it. C and D.
So the remaining items are sidewalks and
A.
roadway width,
Yep, A and B.
and E, yeah.
And then I guess if they want to revert to the previous alignment, E would come back into play as well, which is the offset alignment. And again, if there's some way to offset and provide sidewalk, I'm all for it. It's not the offset that bothers me, as long as I do have an issue with the vertical clearance, and I do think that that should be deferred to the TRC. Because I don't know if they can maintain vertical clearance based on what I've seen. I have no idea. But I certainly don't want it to be a problem.
And commenting on that, I agree with you because it was brought up in the previous discussion of my concerns of the vertical clearance being maintained for not only fire apparatus, but, you know, we're looking at a 12'6" minimum clearance. How is that going to be maintained over the course of time that, you know, we're trying to get a piece of equipment down there and then we shear off the top of that truck because nothing's been changed back. It's overhanging. We can't get access to that. That's going to be, again, that may be a TRC type situation, but still, I brought that up in question in the last one that I'm concerned because we have areas throughout the city, not only in this particular situation, that accessibility has been compromised because of overhang.
But it sounds like even if they have to lose the 21, the overhanging tree, that the offset could benefit the 22 if there's some way to keep that. So,
Yeah, and I completely agree with that.
yeah. So I'm just trying to narrow us down to the issue at hand, and I'm going to have to call on individuals here and see what you guys think on, on this, or call for a motion and go from there. But we do have to get to the end point here.
I mean, I ultimately don't have a problem with the narrower width from the traffic standpoint. I mean, it is a non-continuous street. Yes, other properties will be developed, but we're still talking in the tens of vehicles a day rather than thousands. So there's that. And along with that, you know, the applicant mentioned the potential payment in lieu of sidewalk of somewhere else that it could be. I mean, this is a non-continuous street. People probably walk back there now.
So does it sound like you would be receptive to the alignment in the previous alignment? Potentially,
yeah.
if they have to address the vertical clearance issues
Correct,
now?
yeah.
Okay. How about planning? You guys have any thoughts on that? You might need to turn your mic on. Is your mic on?
Sorry, I'm new. I think from the planning perspective, would also support the previous cross-section proposed. If there's an opportunity to save that tree by doing so, then I think the comprehensive plan certainly supports that effort. At the same time, the comprehensive plan also recommends increased pedestrian connectivity as well. So to go back to the original suggestion of street trees on one
Gentlemen,
side.
I'm going to need to remind everyone to speak into their mics and clearly. It is recorded, and therefore, when we have to go back or as part of the official record, it's important that you guys speak into your mic and clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. The comprehensive plan recommends both preservation of trees, provision of new trees, and pedestrian connectivity. So if there's an opportunity to have street trees on one side and a sidewalk on the other, that would be doing the greatest good for the greatest number.
Okay, so it sounds like you prefer maybe an offset.
Yes.
Okay. I know that the issue that Luke pointed out is that the north side of that sort of what I'll call the bump out, the offset, there's not enough room between the curbing and the right-of-way line to be able to install. I'm assuming we're talking about the sidewalk on the north side, or are we talking about sidewalk on the south side?
I would defer to the engineer on what would be the most feasible there.
I don't think the road could be offset to the south side with the tree. I don't think the road
No,
could be
no, no,
offset.
no, no. I'm just trying to figure out if they can push the offset further south to squeeze in a sidewalk, or would it be, better to, and I don't know that we're going to be able to answer that question from a technical standpoint. It sounds like if I'm hearing right, at least my preference is to somehow find a way to, install sidewalk on one side of the road, street trees on the other. If they can, if they need to bump out the road to preserve the existing tree or trees, it sounds like more and more it's going to be tree and not trees. I'm all for that. I don't know that we can solve exactly how that configuration works in this meeting. I think the TRC has to weigh in on that. They're the technical review committee. Whether that sidewalk goes on the north side of Maple or whether it goes on the south side, I don't know that I have a strong preference. Perhaps the south side, and they can, put some sort of a raised sidewalk, to sort of bridge over those tree roots. Maybe that's the better way to do it.
And could we just leave it with a condition that there would be sidewalk on one side of the street and let TRC determine what's the most viable way to do that?
I think that's reasonable to me. All right, so I got to formulate all that into a motion.
I'd also just add that, the pervious sidewalk material has been used in vegetative situations, so.
Yes, there are. I know that we won't get into the technical aspects of it, but there are options for pervious materials that could potentially be considered, in an isolated spot to help preserve those tree roots. So, I'm kind of with you. It's like the point of this board is to sort of get outside of that box a little bit, and I think that this is a condition that might warrant that, and balance the sort of infrastructure necessary to support the built-out condition while preserving as much of the existing as we can. So here goes. I'm going to make a motion that we approve. It says adjustment number 4, but I think
We'll just call it that, yeah.
we're going to call it that because that's what it's listed in the packet. With the condition that they provide a 5-foot sidewalk on one side of the street. I'm not going to specify which. And I'm blanking out here. We will consider a pavement offset no greater than shown on the previous approval. So obviously we don't want it exaggerated any more than it already is. So sidewalk on one side, street trees on the other, and we would consider the offset to be approved at the TRC level. What'd I miss?
The vertical clearance also at
Oh,
TLC?
yeah, what is the main vertical clearance that you,
I believe I would defer to TRC, but I believe it's not greater than what a fire apparatus is for a Vector truck.
Which is usually 12.5,
So
12 feet 5 inches.
they need to maintain vertical clearance from the edge of the roadway at 12 and a half feet. And if they can do that and preserve both trees, great. If they have to remove one of the trees, then there's still value in keeping the other one. Sorry for that long motion, but I think it can be summarized.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries. Item number 2 is the next item. We okay? We don't need a recess, right? Megacorp Logistics.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the DAC. Yes, this is a request for a design adjustment for Megacorp Logistics, 1011 Ashes Drive. This is for a commercial parking lot. This request is for a design adjustment for the length of a private driveway. The site includes approximately 5 acres. It's currently undeveloped and is zoned O&I. The site does not currently have direct road frontage on Ashes Drive. It is adjacent to the Megacorp Logistics office building. That would be to the west there, and it's highlighted in your, on your site plan shown in front of you. A previous request did come before this committee. That was DA6-1023 and was denied by the DAC. That was on October 18th, 2013. Since that request, we have received a new submittal. The applicant has proposed this revised site plan that's in front of you. This includes the same connections to the Megacorp site, which are the red arrows shown on your screen. They have revised and provided some additional connectivity to the north to the adjacent property. They are showing an adjacent emergency vehicle access to the property to the northeast. Those are the green highlighted arrows shown on this slide. And then they've also shown some additional interconnectivity between parking lot drive aisles. I've got a slide as well that I'll show you to kind of compare the two proposals. The specific request for the design adjustment is that the length of a private driveway shall not exceed 500 linear feet. The applicant has gone beyond that that maximum requirement, I should say. A total drive aisle length is approximately 1,280 feet, and that is provided by the applicant, their engineer. Let's see, these are the existing conditions. This is just showing the current Megacorp layout. And this was the previous plan. And here's the comparison between the two previous plans being on the left side and their current plan proposal on the right. Again, this is for a proposed commercial parking lot use. That is a use permitted by right. Doesn't have specific parking standards per code. However, an office use, maximum parking standards are 1 space per 250 square feet of gross floor area, just for your reference. That concludes my presentation. I'd like to enter this report into the record. Happy to answer any questions that you have. The applicant's here as well, I should say.
Pat, hey, I know this was discussed at least a little bit at the last meeting, but I do want to clarify that I'm not seeing it So how far is it from the roadway to basically the tip of the red arrow there now? And then, I guess you said it was 1180, I'm presuming that's to the furthest point.
12.
But how non-compliant is it?
Right. So this is based on math that I asked from the applicant, and I provided in the report. 1280 is the total feet back to Ashes Drive.
1280, sorry.
And so that would be 780 feet in excess of the 500 foot.
Are they over 5 to the beginning of the parking lot now?
I don't have that calculation. I'd probably defer to the applicant on the current length for the existing parking lot.
Okay. And is there any proposed phasing to this parking lot, or is it proposed to be built all at one time?
I believe it's supposed to be constructed all at one time. It's currently under TRC review, and I don't believe there's any phasing proposed.
Okay, and I have some questions about the emergency accesses, but I'll save those for the applicant.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Pat? Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good afternoon. I'm Shane Lipper with Right Angle Engineering. We're the applicant's consultant, and good to be back here with you, Mr. Gordon, and committee. We were here back in October, and you posed a question just a second ago to Pat. The existing distance from Ashes to the red arrow exceeds 500 feet already. I think it's 650, somewhere around there. So the, we discussed this back at, in the October meeting, but, the Megacorp Logistics property fronts Ashes Drive, and this property prior was owned by the town of Wrightsville Beach. It was a landlocked parcel, and Megacorp took ownership over it some years ago after the town of Wrightsville Beach had removed all of their landfill material. But the short story is it's a landlocked parcel that, without approval by the Design Adjustment Committee, this renders this property unusable. I mean, there's no function in, in getting to this property, building, parking, or otherwise, without, this approval from the Design Adjustment Committee. It would, would really establish a hardship that couldn't be, achieved. There are Megacorp Logistics operates, a business in, the quad buildings there that are on Ashes Drive, and they currently are, operating at about, 437 employees, and then they have growth potential this year by summer to, add 50, 70 more employees, and their existing parking is only 238, so there's not existing parking really to accommodate, their existing, employee load, which is, established the need to expand, this satellite parking area. The request for the adjustment, obviously comes from, connecting to the existing parking facility that's there. The closest opportunity, if you were to, go through Megacorp's existing property, would have to go through the existing stormwater pond. So there's topographic constraints. The adjacent properties also are contributing to this need for having to come to the Design Adjustment Committee. From our previous meeting, and Pat had a slide up there before, we did go back and, through TRC and, some discussions we had there, how to improve the site layout to provide some future connection. And Pat, if you could flip back to our site layout plan that you had.
You can do it with the keyboard.
Oh, all right. Let's see. That works. The green notated areas on the north end of the property, and the 1,280 linear feet that Pat refers to is, of course, to those far parking spaces on the northeast corner up there. That's the furthest distance from Ashes Drive. We have provided future stub-out connections to those adjacent properties. The owners have been in contact. They're trying to make some headway in providing some right-of-way through there that we potentially connect to, their existing driveways or drive aisles, with no success yet, but we feel like there's movement, but we just don't have anything hard in writing right now. But the connection to the right on the eastern property line is an emergency vehicle connection. We do think that probably would be easily achieved with discussions of those adjacent owners to provide, a locked gate and an improved driveway access with a gate there that, emergency vehicles could access, but it wouldn't be a permanent driveway. And then the future connection to the north would be if, that property, I think it's, commercial realtors, offices of Sir Tyler, if that possibility would ever open up, we would have that stub out there.
Okay. Any questions for Shane?
One other item I would interject from the last meeting, Chief Elrod, we did go back and we've been working with Duke Energy on this transmission line. There is the high voltage transmission line that runs north-south through the property, and we have addressed, concerns with parking under there. There are some stipulations in the fire code that, you reduce the vehicle size that could park in there. Vehicle weight has to be less than 10,000 pounds, which most, small vehicles up to, reasonable sized trucks still fall under the 10,000 pound limit. So, we'll have signage that will prevent, large vehicles from parking within the transmission easement. There'll also be signage for parking that wouldn't exceed 12 hours. So, which, they wouldn't allow that in most cases anyway, but no, long overnight parking would be allowed. That transmission line voltage is 230 kilovolts, which is under, the state requirement for that. And the conductor is over 25 feet, from the ground surface. So we've met all the conditions of the fire code for parking within the transmission line easement, except for, and we are working on the encroachment agreement with Duke Energy, with Bill Wilder. I've had several meetings with him since our last meeting. So.
Thank you.
Can you describe your frontage to what looks like is labeled Old Macomber Road?
Old Macomber Station Road is I think if historically you go back, it was maybe a cart path that went through there, but it is not a right-of-way roadway of any measure. Technically, I think Old Macomber Station is an easement through the landfall property, and we are showing a type B, buffer along that entire property line to buffer from landfall association. So I don't think Old Macomber Station is a right-of-way. I would have to, further concur with that, but I don't think that it is. There are no connections from landfall that connect into Old Macomber Station.
And just for clarification, it is not a right-of-way.
Yeah, it shows abandoned on here. Okay. I know it's not improved, but I didn't know if it was a right-of-way, like an unimproved right-of-way. You're saying it is not.
It is not a right-of-way.
Thank you. Any other questions for Shane? And to follow up on that, you are not or are proposing any phasing for this project? Is the intent to build the entire project at once?
The intent is to build it all at once. There's, I think you mentioned last meeting, Rob, that you've been there. There's a parking need for sure, and I think that the intention is to build it all at one time. It, would be the intention to do that. If there, was some compelling reasons to phase some of it, I think, we certainly would consider that. And we could work that out with TRC if we needed to.
Okay.
We're not totally through TRC. I think we just got a second round of comments that we're working out
But
right now.
you've been to formal TRC,
Yes.
and you're beyond
Yes.
that at this point, so
Yes.
you're kind of in the crumbs of the
Yeah.
review. All right.
Real quick question, you mentioned on these proposed, where your green arrows are on this, these are going to be emergency vehicle access points. That's proposed, was that part of what was discussed in TRC?
Yes.
And the fact that you were alluding to that they would basically be a locked gate from the approach where the vehicles would come in from. I'm assuming that you were looking at like a siren-activated type gate or something of that nature to where emergency vehicles can access it, but the John Q. Public or anyone else cannot get them in that way.
Right.
And that's as proposed, but do you have, is this just a work in progress that these are going to be established, or this is what you're proposing that you're still working on, pretty much?
Well, our drawings chief, we would have a ABC stone, pathway, roadway that would go to the property line, and that's at the point where it would be security gated. So, it's definitely going to go to that point. From there into the adjacent property, we're in discussions with the adjacent property owner, that improvement would be made between the subject property line and the adjacent parking area, which, is, 75 feet maybe. That part of it is not in concrete right now, but we're working with those adjacent property owners to formalize something. The property, I think, is up for sale, so it's a little,
Which property?
the adjacent property that we're,
Both to the north and to the
no, just the one to the west.
northeast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Northeast, excuse me.
And this is, you've had your first, I'm sorry, I'm probably repeating. You already had your first formal review by
Yes.
TRC.
Yeah.
And was this a recommendation through TRC to establish these access points?
Yes, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead,
I was
please.
going to say, Pat, we probably talked about this last time, but just to re-clarify, is there any requirement for this parking lot to connect to adjacent parking lots? The interconnectivity or anything like that?
No, there would not be a code requirement based on it not being along a frontage road.
Okay, thank you.
272 spaces, is that what I'm reading is proposed? I don't know whether that was the current alignment or the previous or current. That's what the plans
Yeah,
show. Is
Rob,
that-
that's right. It's 272 standard, and then plus the, 7, I think, ADA spaces, plus 6 EV spaces. So you're,
Whatever that
285, 290, something like
Got
that.
it. Okay. Thank you. I may have additional questions, but we got to get the public hearing. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
You'll need to say your name into the microphone so it's on the record.
Hi, my name is Charles Roy. One of the questions I would just have is, what was your questioning as far as phasing? Was that a concern as far as phasing, just from my point of view?
Are you the applicant? I'm sorry.
I'm helping the applicant. I'm sorry, I'm here on behalf of the applicant, the owner, Megacorp.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, since there's nobody else from the public, I don't see any harm in talking about it now, but.
Sorry about that.
I think it was establishing the need for the number of spaces. I mean, I think, there's a topographic constraint here, and there's a need for additional parking. But there's very sort of preliminary plans to expand in the future. And, I mean, this is a very significant deviation from the standards.
Right.
And I think that, you know, and there, you know, it's like we have a very questionable emergency access, you know, situation right now. So, you know, we're trying to find that balance for, you know, satisfying that current need versus satisfying the future need. That was why I was asking the question.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure as Shane, you know, was mentioning, as far as their parking spaces now, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of where people are parking currently. I mean, they're all over the side roads, they're all over the roads, there's just not current spaces. As they grow, it's just gonna get worse. So, I mean, to do it in one phase, which would alleviate all the side road parking, they would probably fill that space up fairly quick, just on your.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? All right. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. We just have the one variance, Linda, today? No preliminary plan approval or any of that stuff? Okay.
I think we talked about it last time, and it's not directly related, but pedestrian access to and from. It's good to provide emergency access. That was a major concern. But if this parking lot is going to be used by you know, adjacent lots or potentially adjacent lots, I think some pedestrian access or multi-use access between the site should be considered.
So if I'm reading it right, they're providing pedestrian connections back to the existing Megacorp facility, but not, and I guess it could be pretty easily extended to the north. I'm not seeing a connection to the northeast, a pedestrian connection. But there's, yeah, I don't know. So,
Can I still speak, Rob?
yes, Shane, thank you.
Thank you. There is sidewalk running to the north on that adjacent, that string of pervious parking spaces to the north, which could be extended to that property line. And then there is, we have a sidewalk that runs to the west, you know, just south of the green emergency connection, which, you know, there could be a little stub that could put up, you know, and we could go to the property line right there. You know, it's close, but you know, that would be an easy adjustment to put that that connection up there, and it does connect back to the main Megacorp.
Okay, so if they leased a facility in that property to the northeast, they could provide a pedestrian connection to that property.
Yeah.
And then I assume the intent would be at that point, they would make a full vehicular connection between those parking lots. I mean, that's ideal. That would eliminate almost all of my concerns, but.
Yeah, and not to muddy the water any, but in terms of the DAC, still to go out that adjacent, or that green connector, and you loop up through and up to Ashes Drive, it still exceeds 500 feet.
Yeah.
Just wanted to note that.
Sir.
I know, one more question there. I noted one of the differences in this site plan and the previous one were the two southernmost parking areas were connected to create kind of a ring.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason that could not be accomplished on those two northern, just for general traffic flow within the parking lot, so that somebody's not, oh, this one's a dead end, I didn't realize it, I gotta back up and.
Yeah, Dennis, I don't see why that couldn't be done. You know, I know some of it was, you know, its length of, you know, how far the fire truck needs to go to back up, and it wouldn't exceed that amount. So I think, you know, from that very northern parking space, you know, a little loop connector down, you know, and, you know, it would connect just behind the stub for the emergency vehicle access. So, you know, I think that's reasonable.
I mean, that's how the adjustment that you made from the
Yeah,
previous
yeah.
on those other two, I think if I'm putting words in his mouth, it's something kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I, that's a great comment. I was looking at that same option.
Mm-hmm. We can do that.
Any other discussion on this item? I mean, we do need to get to a motion, depending on how everybody feels about it. Well, I think the first and foremost is I recognize the uniqueness of this parcel, how there are topographic constraints, you know, it doesn't have any right-of-way frontage, you know, no platted connectivity. I understand that's difficult. What I keep struggling with is they're proposing 272 spaces, and while there is a need, you know, parking on the side of the road in Ashes is not prohibited. It's an option. I mean, that's why we have that parking. So it's not like that's not a viable option. So there's definitely a need, but I don't know, I'm struggling with, is there a 272 space need? But I don't know how the rest of the group feels. I mean, the circulation is better. It would be even better if they did the option that you mentioned, Dennis. Any other thoughts?
I guess my question would be from a procedural standpoint, if the connections to the adjacent properties are not 100% formalized, and if we were to make a motion conditioning the formalization of that as a condition of approval, and then it not pan out, we're right back here, are we not?
Yeah. Yeah, if we were to approve this conditional upon them making one or both of those, you know, vehicular connections, and they can't make them, then yeah, I think that's the way. I mean, me personally, I feel like, you see where that, I guess it's that kind of grayed out, I don't know what type of vehicle that's supposed to be, but right here, that vehicle kind of, I feel like the circulation between the two red arrows and that expanded parking is really pretty good. It's now, like, I feel like the site constraints and the need justify, you know, and the extent of the variance is justified to that point. I feel like personally for me, if they want to do the balance of this, which seems like it's more in line with the future expansion of Megacorp, they need to have some kind of a connection. I mean, I don't mind if it's emergency access. Hang on, sorry, we're beyond that at this point, but.
Yeah, I'm keying in with what was just mentioned, that, you know, as I understood, the reason why this is written into the technical standards is because of emergency vehicle access and the distance from a main thoroughfare. The addition of emergency access roads are proposed, but I'm kind of agreeing, not kind of, I am agreeing with him, if we have no guarantees of that, because we're requesting a variance of such a long distance, that we're going to be right back in the same boat unless this is solidified from the standpoint of, yes, this is a done deal, we have connectivity, we can come in. But as of what we're looking at right now, it's proposed.
What do you think about the option of unconditionally approving, you know, that lower phase and then conditionally approving the upper phase?
I can
Does that make
support
any
that.
difference to you?
I can support that.
Okay. I feel like that's my motion is, and I don't know how to delineate that on the plans, but Pat or whichever staff is going to be looking at that. You see that little kind of grayed out vehicle that's sitting on the screen there. You got a laser pointer? Do you know where I'm talking about? Yes, right there. That's it. From that point, I mean, below that, you've got dual connections to the existing parking. You've got good circulation between, you know, those drive aisles, and the extent of the variance is not as extreme. I feel like that variance I could approve based on what is proposed here. If they want to go to the northern section of that parking, the remainder of that parking, it's going to have to be conditional upon providing, I would say, one or the other connection. I'm not going to say, you know, the north one or the northeast one as an emergency access, improved emergency access connection. I would love for it to be full vehicular access, but I understand that there are site constraints and you have to negotiate. But I also know that the northeast connection was the access point when they were clearing this parcel or remediating it, you know, so there's been that's been an access point in the past. Hopefully that can be, you know, negotiated, you know, in the future. But that's my motion. I'm going to make the motion that we approve the waiver.
Rob, I don't think that you can do a condition that affects neighboring properties like that, because the neighboring properties don't have to agree to that.
And we have to deny it until they can. All right. Well, if we're not permitted to do, can we do it as an option? I mean, I would love for them to be able to negotiate this and then not come back.
Yeah, you could ask that they explore that option, but you can't condition the approval upon an agreement with an adjacent property owner that may not agree to that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, so no, I appreciate this distinction, because this is exactly what I'm trying to work out is there a scenario where they continue their negotiations with their adjoining property owner? If they are successful, they do not need to come back to this board for approval, because even with the emergency access connection, the variance is still there.
Yeah,
So
that would be fine. You can't condition the approval upon an agreement with an adjacent owner that may or may not agree to this. Do you see what I'm saying?
how do we approve it then, if we can't put a condition that they provide an emergency access point?
Approval with the understanding that they will continue negotiations with the adjacent property owners, but
What if they aren't successful? See, I would rather go the other way. If that's the way it's got to be, I think we have to deny it. At least in my opinion. And then they can come back with an agreement if they have to. I would love to find a scenario where we can conditionally approve this with the access point. That's my opinion anyway.
It sounds like we cannot approve it until that agreement with the adjacent property owner is obtained.
Mr.
Or
Chair,
there's a different design.
can we pause for a few minutes so we can have a staff discussion about a possible best way forward?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know what the procedure is for something like this. Do we go on recess? Do we discuss it?
if you want to take a recess for a few minutes so that we can discuss.
Great, thank you. We'll take a 5 or 10 minute recess. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call us back to order. Appreciate the patience with the recess on that while we work out some procedural issues. And I think we are going to continue with the motion that was being presented, and that is, it's a two-part, I'll make the motion that it's a two-part approval. The southern half of the parking to the, I guess the vehicle that we talked about, we showed earlier on the screen, I don't need to condition that parking. It's got good circulation, and the extent of the variance, I believe, is justified. So there's no condition, as far as I'm concerned, the motion is to approve that. Any additional parking would require an emergency access connection to an adjacent property with the details to be worked out by the Technical Review Committee. And to improve the circulation on the two northern legs, as was discussed previously. That's between the two green arrows. Is that understood?
Does that include pedestrian connectivity as well?
Thank you. Pedestrian connection to the adjacent property in the vicinity of the emergency access connection.
Well stated, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this issue? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. One last item of business is we have to consider the meeting and submission deadline schedule that was presented in your packet.
Chairman Gordon, I also need to make one correction to the meeting schedule. The January date says January 17th, 2023. That should be January 17th, 2024.
Good catch.
Thank you.
With that change, is there any, I guess, two things to point out, and they were noted on the proposed schedule, is the June and December meetings were moved from the third Wednesday to the second Wednesday due to conflicts with city holiday schedules. I need a motion to approve that, correct, Amy?
Move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'll second that. All in favor of approving the schedule with the correction noted for the year on the January meeting, say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion. All right. So we are adjourned. Thank you.